Guess who got a wizard's hat just for this video? It's me. I did. Hogwarts Legacy is one of my favorite games of the year. It played a pivotal role in me getting into Harry Potter for the very first time this year, and I made a whole video about it that you can check out, linked down in the description and up in the annotations somewhere up there. Hogwarts Legacy, though, was such a fantastic experience as it got me completely immersed in the wizarding world and made me want to know more about the Harry Potter franchise and indulge myself in the whimsy and magic of Hogwarts. It opened up an entirely new avenue of entertainment for me, introduced me to one of my newest favorite series of all time, and for that, I seriously cannot thank it enough. From the moment I entered Hogwarts in the game and the music swelled, I just felt a wave of nostalgia for a world that I had personally never experienced as a kid, which I think speaks really highly about the far reach of the franchise in general. The developers absolutely nailed how it should feel to wander around Hogwarts and the surrounding areas, and I felt myself getting lost in the world building and beauty of Hogwarts Castle. In this video, I'll go through some of the story and gameplay and also address some things they probably could improve for the inevitable sequel. If you're here for the first time and love Harry Potter stuff like we do, then hit those like and subscribe buttons and stick around because we are soon launching our series of episodes called Potter Watch, where we go book by book and movie by movie with some guests from the community, talking full spoilers and spinning theories along the way and whatnot. It's going to be a super fun series of episodes, and I really hope to see you there. So, what is this game about story-wise, you ask? Well, you play as a witch or wizard who has been invited to Hogwarts as a 5th year, and early on you realize that you have access to a kind of ancient magic that nobody else does. In the background, there are evil wizards working to claim a great source of ancient magic for themselves and become all-powerful and basically take over everything. Along the way, you make friends with several students at Hogwarts as well as various teachers who help you in your journey to uncover the mystery of the ancient magic and to protect it from the dark wizards. It's honestly a pretty straightforward story that isn't really that incredible, but is still super fun along the way. I was never as invested in the main story as I was the side missions, but it was still fun to follow the rabbit hole and see what happens next. Where the game really shines, though, is in those side missions, and there are a ton of them, all with their own fleshed out storyline, and they're not just fetch quests or kill 10 of this kind of enemy kind of quests. They all have little story arcs and are really interesting with really cool character development for the side characters involved. One of my favorite quests was helping a student named Poppy rid the surrounding areas of poachers who are going after the local magical beasts, and over the course of several chained side missions, you get to know her really well, and I felt like my character and her were actually really great friends by the end of the mission chain. There's also another side mission where you befriend a student who is struggling with black magic use to help a sick sister, and this was probably the quest line that I was the most invested in. These characters were written really well. They felt like real people that did things that you could see somebody actually doing, and I really enjoyed my time getting to know them. I would imagine that in the next game you play as a 6th year and the stakes of the main story would grow with each game. They've already said they're working on a sequel, which is to be expected after how well this game sold. I mean, seriously, I think it sold like 15 million copies and made over $1 billion. That's nothing to sneeze at. I also really loved Hogwarts Castle and the surrounding areas. Everything felt extremely handcrafted, and every single area was very interesting to roam around in. I loved landing on my broom in a little tiny town out of the way and just kind of looking around at what they have going on there. And this game is beautiful graphically. All of the lighting from little candles and gas lamps really made me want to just wander around at night and see everything all lit up. In every town, there's so many interesting characters that you can talk to, even if they don't offer a quest. Usually, you can find someone who will tell you something interesting or some sort of anecdote or a little bit more about themselves.
Can you tell me more about yourself?
Oh, I haven't had a normal conversation with anyone for a while, so pardon me if I'm a little rusty. My father passed away recently, and I've been completely occupied with keeping the business afloat. I hadn't realised how much work went into running a shop. Inventories, maintenance, customers, bills, accounts, and on and on.
I played this game for about a week or so before picking up the books, and as I read, I became increasingly more impressed with how incredibly lore accurate this game is. There's so many little Easter eggs and little pieces of lore that directly correlate to things in the books, and you can tell that the developers and writers really had a true love for the world of Harry Potter. Hogwarts Castle is absolutely gorgeous, and it's so vast, and there's so many interesting corridors and secret rooms that you could literally spend hours just wandering around and taking it all in, day or night. It really makes you feel like you're a student at Hogwarts, whether you're eating in the Great Hall, attending classes, wandering the hallways, or even just lounging in your common room. The outside areas are super fun as well. I loved walking out to the courtyard and hearing all of the surprisingly in-depth conversations between students. This was done so well. Students will have full-on conversations and tell each other stories that are really fun to listen in on.
I'll be weeks. Never thought about it. Well, you might be right.
It's an important thing, a broom. Can give you a lot of confidence, the right broom, even if you're not a good flyer.
I concur. You exude confidence with your silver arrow, till you get on the thing.
That's not true at all. I'm a fine flyer. Let's hope when you get...
There's also the animated suits of armor and ghosts that are always kind of flying around and having their own little conversations and getting into their own kind of antics.
I don't think I can do this now.
I think where Hogwarts Castle falls a little flat, though, is that I think I was kind of expecting an experience more like Bully, the game from, what was that, like 2006 or something, where you regularly attend classes and there's a lot of them and they're a kind of mini game in some ways, and you are supposed to attend them basically every day from what I remember. I think in Hogwarts Legacy, I was only able to go to 2 classes per subject, and they were mostly just really quick cutscenes. Some of them you didn't even really do anything in them. It would have been so cool to need to be at potions class a certain number of times per week, and for that matter, some sort of calendar system would have been great, because the game doesn't really delineate between weekends or normal school days. And I know that's probably asking a lot, but I think they should have focused on the school aspect of it more rather than the go anywhere, anytime aspect. Another side of that coin is that although the castle feels very alive with kids walking around everywhere and talking to each other, none of the NPCs have any sort of schedule. They just kind of despawn or walk aimlessly. If you go into the dorm rooms at night, or even if you go into someone's house at night, you won't see anybody in their beds or even getting ready for bed or anything like that. And it's a little bit immersion breaking when you realize that these students that are walking around Hogwarts aren't actually going anywhere. You'd think they'd all be walking to Hogsmeade or something on the weekend, or heading back to their dorms or going downstairs for breakfast. They all just kind of spawn in when the player isn't looking. And from what I understand, there's now a mod to fix this, but it's a little bit buggy. and it doesn't quite work all the time. But I think as they work on the mod more and more, it'll make the school feel more alive and cohesive as all the kids are walking down to the Great Hall from their dorm rooms and whatnot. The other negative I have is that while the open world was super fun to explore and was captivating to fly around in, the extra little objectives that weren't side missions got kind of repetitive. Their version of bandit camps weren't anything super new to the genre, and I was pretty bummed to find out the ancient ruins and caves were nothing more than a hole in the ground, essentially one room with a chest inside, which usually contained a pretty worthless item. I didn't mind the repetitive Merlin trials as much as some people did, but I could absolutely see how they would get mind-numbing after a while. There was some other collectathon stuff that you would see in most Ubisoft titles, and I think they just put them in to fill out the map, which, like I said, is otherwise interesting and teeming with life. Hogsmeade is a perfect example of this. I really wish we had gotten Diagon Alley, but I'm really happy with Hogsmeade. This is an area that is really fun to just walk around in and explore, even if it doesn't have a high level of interactability. There's different stores that have basically everything you'll need, and it's just a good place to kill some time in. So there's kind of a lot to talk about when it comes to gameplay, so bear with me a minute. Let's start with the combat. Throwing around spells in this game is so much fun, and it makes you really have to think about how you're going to chain spells together to achieve a desired effect. Especially at higher difficulties, you have to think on your feet and use whatever spell fits that particular encounter. Not to mention you have cooldowns on all your spells, so you have to be thinking ahead for what spell is about to be off its cooldown and what you can use in the meantime. But for example, there's a type of dark wizard that will call down lightning, and if you wait for just the right moment when he's starting to cast the spell, and then you disarm him with Expelliarmus, his spell backfires and he calls down the lightning on himself. The first time this happened to me, I was giddy with excitement, realizing how in-depth the spell system was, and made it a point to keep Expelliarmus on hand when fighting those enemies. Of course, you have other enemies that are more susceptible to fire damage and all sorts of other spells and elements, so it makes it really fun to figure out what every enemy's weakness was. The only downside to these enemy encounters is there's not much in the way of variety. There's maybe 6 different types of enemies, most of which are humans that are either dark wizards or poachers, which essentially amount to the same thing. They use the same kind of magic and whatnot. But I'd love to see a greater variety of enemies in the next game, especially more like dangerous magical beasts and stuff like that. The combat system works by having 4 different quick slot rotations you can activate using the D-pad, and you can customize each one to have a spot in the face button slots. By holding down the right trigger, it allows you to hit one of the 4 face buttons on your quick slot to cast your spell. The variety of the spells is also really impressive, as is the skill tree that accompanies them. You have most of the spells that you see most commonly used in the books, as well as a couple new ones. You have attack spells like Confringo, Incendio, and Bombardo, which are all different types of fire spells. Then you have Defendo, which is kind of like the Sectum Sempra from the books. Then the more utilitarian spells like Reparo and Wingardium Leviosa, as well as spells to halt an opponent in their tracks like Arresto Momentum. There's also 4 spells which are your push and pull and otherwise toss around like Accio and Depulso. And of course, you also have some of the unforgivable curses, which I think was kind of a sore spot for many players. The curses are really cool when you're using them, but they do not impact the story or the world around you at all. It would have been so cool to see people treat you differently for learning and using the curses, but it really has no impact at all on that front. And it's something I really hope they implement for the next game, because this series desperately needs a morality system. As it is, there's not many ways the interactions and endings can go. There's not really any good or bad. You can just be either a straight up good guy or kind of vaguely an asshole sometimes. But let's get back to combat. So with those spells, you also have your skill tree, which is incredibly fun to put points into. I feel like with a lot of modern games, the skill tree is kind of unintuitive and just isn't that much fun to dick around with. And yes, we're looking at you, Starfield, but everything in this skill tree helps significantly with your spells and even adds new effects, which in turn change how you implement that spell into your combat rotation. For example, one of the first upgrades in the Dark Arts tree is that when you use Stupefy, which is kind of your parry spell, it now curses them and makes them more susceptible to your next attacks. So if you're someone who primarily used dodge instead of Stupefy like me, now you may be more inclined to use the Stupefy spell. On top of that, one of the next upgrades is that using the now cursed Stupefy on multiple opponents, it links them together, and the damage that you do to one inflicts damage to them all, causing a chain reaction. You can wipe out whole rooms of enemies by defending multiple times with Stupefy and then putting the whammy on one enemy, and now the whole rest of the room is affected as well. And that's just one example. I had to stop myself from listing a whole bunch of other ones. All of the skill trees are super important and really worth reading through what each one does. After combat, we have gear, and let me just say, thank God they implemented a transmog system like Assassin's Creed Odyssey, meaning that any gear you've collected can be used as your appearance rather than what you're actually wearing. A lot of the gear looks pretty lame, especially the hats and glasses. I found myself sticking with usually one of two hats, usually no glasses, and mostly just swapped out my robes as I saw fit or when I would get a cool colored one. The good news is that there really is a ton of items, so customization is pretty infinite. The downside to a lot of the gear, though, is that there's not a ton of extra stat buffs like in The Witcher or Assassin's Creed Odyssey. Usually you'll find something with a couple extra points in armor and you'll just equip that, and you're not really having to decide between a special piece with a great stat buff and another lower quality piece with more armor or different stat buffs. Of course, this is something that I would love to see be done better in the next game. I will say though that I really enjoyed customizing my character. There's so many different ways that you can go with it, from homeless dumpster wizard to Indiana Jones to high academia nobleman. Also, the cloth graphics look really, really good. I was never not impressed with seeing my robe fly around in the wind or see it swoosh around my legs when I came to a stop. Your wand also has a large number of different grips that you can get for it, but again, it doesn't have any stat bonuses or anything like that. Same with the brooms. I loved collecting new brooms and flying around on a broom that was essentially on fire or jet black, but again, no stat bonuses. Speaking of brooms though, flying around in this game feels awesome. Like it feels so incredibly good, and the first time you take off on your broom truly feels magical. The first takeoff and the music swells and you really feel like you are there flying around Hogwarts for the first time. That was really the moment that I knew that I would love this game, and it's a part of this game, a scene from this game that I will not forget. As far as other gameplay goes, there's also a kind of zoo that you can keep in the Room of Requirement where you bring back magical beasts and you can essentially farm them for materials for various upgrades, but I didn't really mess around with that more than I had to. but also in the room of requirement, you can customize it with all sorts of stuff, which is something that I did do a bit of. I made a whole room with an absurd amount of potions stations and plant growing stations so I could grow the ingredients I needed for my various potions. And once I got into that, I really went crazy with it and had all my potions maxed out in my inventory all the time. It was great. I think my biggest gripe about the gameplay is just the lack of in-depth RPG features. I've been calling it an RPG light, but it's pretty straightforward with little to no choice as far as those elements go. There's not really a way to build your character for a specific skill set outside of what you can do in the skill tree, and certainly little to no choice in dialogue options or affecting the story in any real way. I would love to see them use this game as a foundation and build on the RPG mechanics and make it really deep and really intuitive with lots of different stat buffs on the clothing and whatnot, and lots of different dialogue options and just more choice. Because as it is right now, there's not a whole lot of choice in this game. I think they have some really good building blocks here, and I can't wait to see what they do with it in the next one. So overall, I absolutely adored this game. I have my complaints here and there, but as far as having a real Hogwarts experience, I think this game pretty much nails it. I genuinely love my time in this game, and I can't wait to do multiple playthroughs just to experience it all again. This game is as beautiful graphically as it is absolutely magical and captivating, and was such an incredible escape from reality and into the wonderful wizarding world.
You're just in time. Have a seat.
I owe this game so much for introducing me to the Harry Potter books, which I had never really had an interest in before. The Harry Potter series has become an instant top 5 favorite series for me, and I'm in pretty deep. I'm looking for Harry Potter art for my wall and everything. I'm totally a Potterhead now. But seriously, I'm so glad I decided to play this game. It opened up a whole new world for me that I can't wait to explore over and over. If you guys would like to see me stream Hogwarts Legacy on a new character, maybe a Slytherin playthrough or something, let me know in the comments or reach out on Twitter, Discord, or Patreon linked below. Patreon helps us buy more books to talk about on the podcast and pays for things like getting our logo redesigned. You can get exclusive content over there as well by backing us at any tier, but honestly, the best way to support us is just by subscribing and liking the video. That helps a ton. Stay tuned in for our big Potter Watch episode series coming soon. We can't wait to talk about this magical series in full detail with all the spoilers on the table. Thanks for watching, and until next time,
you belong in Slytherin!
And a big shout out to our first Night Angel tier patron, Shad Zaman. Thank you so much, man.